I'm Holdaway. I am the Health and Wellbeing Consultant with Westfield Health. I work with the Herefordshire and Worcestershire Chamber, so I am your contact if you do want to find out any more information in regards to what we're talking about now, so coping with and coping after COVID. And also if you want to find out a little bit more about our cash plans, so our chamber dedicated cash plans, but also our health and wellbeing initiatives and products as well. We're joined with Richard Holmes, who is our Director of Wellbeing at Westfield Health. And Richard continues to lead the wellbeing arm of Westfield Health, doing a great job for us all. And he's continually developing unique evidence-based solutions for the corporate wellbeing market. So, hello, Richard. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, Sam, and hi, everyone. I don't think there's anything more to introduce there, is there? But yeah, it's great to be here, everyone. And hopefully we've got some bits and pieces that will be of interest and of value to you.
Okay, so let's get straight into this then. So, Richard, just to get us started, can you tell us a bit about the latest research Westfield Health have done?
Okay, Sam. So everyone, you probably recognise that as a wellbeing company, we ourselves recognise that, you know, if the pandemic's taught us anything, it's that things are rarely straightforward, and our recovery from the pandemic, whether that's economic, social, physical or mental, it's not going to be linear. It's going to be all over the place, I'm afraid. So this year, what we did is we produced two reports, one called Coping with COVID, the other Coping After COVID. Now, the first one focused on the impact of COVID on people's well-being. The second then looked at the impact that was having on businesses, and also potentially the role well-being could play in boosting businesses' recovery from the pandemic. So to produce both reports, we did that over the last winter, and we talked to a representative sample of around 1,600 people throughout the UK. And that also included a significant number of HR professionals. So that's the basics. Yeah.
So let's look at the Coping with COVID report first.
Okay.
What does this report tell us about the toll the pandemic is taking on employees' mental health?
Well, it had a really significant impact, and we're going to be sending out the reports to everyone so afterwards, so you'll actually see for yourself. And the mental health piece is almost a second pandemic alongside COVID. I'm trying not to be too dramatic there, but it certainly feels like that. Over 1 in 3 people reported that their mental health wasn't good, with almost half of people saying it's got worse over the last 12 to 14 months. Now, we all know mental health was a big issue before the pandemic began. So we need to remember we were on the back foot when the pandemic started. And the pandemic is now causing some real mental health struggles for a lot of people.
It sure is, isn't it? And what kind of things are employees struggling with?
Well, I think you've got to look at it in terms of where people are coming from. So many of us are working from home, for example. That's created lots of challenges in terms of we tend to be working longer hours. We're finding it difficult to separate the boundary between work and home life when we're working at home. And a lot of us are missing the social side of work, if I'm honest. I am particularly. For those of us that are going into work, the challenge is perhaps more of a concern about health in the workplace and how we actually get to work safely. And work is also causing quite a bit of worry at the moment. The report revealed that the top 3 causes of mental health issues were generally feeling anxious about work, worrying about losing our jobs, particularly those of us on furlough, and concerns about our health as a result of work, especially for those people that are actually going in. Now, these report results weren't necessarily a surprise to us, as demand from employers for all the coaching webinars we've been running and the support materials we've been providing on the website have been focused on very similar issues.
I can say that those have definitely been challenges for us as well within Westfield Health.
I think I've seen a few people smiling, actually, those with the cameras turned on. I think a few of us have felt some of those pressures or know somebody that has, yeah. Yeah.
Definitely, especially with children at home during the lockdowns. That was a different challenge altogether, wasn't it? So what impact is this having on businesses, Richard?
Well, there's a couple of headline stats, I guess, from the research. The first one is that we found anyway, a 10% increase in mental health related absence during the pandemic. And when you work the numbers out on that, that's an estimated 14 billion cost to the economy as a whole. Now, given that data in our report research was self-reported, the likelihood is the full extent of that might not be reflected in companies' payroll reports. So that's, if you like, a visible impact, but there are also invisible impacts such as lost productivity. So part of the research showed that 1 in 3 were saying that mental health had affected their productivity on a weekly basis. Now, I'm sure everyone on this call, that's something we can all relate to. I can hold my hands up to this, especially on occasion. It's had a huge impact on our motivation whilst we're at work, hasn't it? So this starts to give us a flavour of the size of impact, and it also highlights perhaps the need for employers to invest in solutions so that businesses can recover as quickly as they can.
Some scary facts, that, isn't it? Are you seeing employees reacting this way?
Yeah, and I just want to be careful there. We do mention all the doom and gloom figures because they're the headline stats, but an awful lot of people have got a lot of benefits out of this. For a lot of people, actually working from home, for example, is working out really well. We know that exercise levels, which are really important to health, have actually increased dramatically because we've got more time if we're working from home than because we've lost the commute time. So just keep a balance when we're talking about these things. It certainly isn't all doom and gloom, but we have seen a huge uplift in the demand for our support services over the last 12-14 months. A good example of that is December. You can probably imagine that for us, delivering wellbeing services, December's a really, really quiet month. And actually, we lose half of it because people are on holiday over Christmas. Last December was recorded the highest revenues for wellbeing webinars for any December in our history. So it really has really has been this huge uplift in interest and demand in the workplace for how wellbeing can support the business as a whole. And that demand's also reflected in the report. So in the report, 84% of the HR leaders we talked to said wellbeing is becoming more important to their business, or they're seeing the importance more to their business. 81% said that they'd increased their wellbeing spend during the pandemic. And 36% said they expected that increased spend to increase even further during 2021. So that's good news, because an awful lot of employees, over a quarter in fact, in the research stated that they're looking for extra wellbeing support in the coming months from their employer. So that's the good news stuff. It's really starting to work through.
I'm definitely seeing that from a health and wellbeing consultant point of view as well, Richard. That more businesses are looking to invest in wellbeing and invest in their people in the right way as well.
Yeah, definitely.
So what can employers do to help their staff?
Well, there's no magic bullet because every organization is different, isn't it? And every organization has different challenges. So I would say the first step is actually talk to your people, find out from them what would benefit them most, then introduce and monitor the impact of those initiatives that you put in place. Now, for these any initiatives you put in place to be fully effective, it's critical to prioritize wellbeing at a leadership level. So people have to see that the business sees wellbeing as a business investment rather than just an expense. Yeah. As I mentioned earlier, employees are looking to their employers for support, not just mental health, by the way, huge amount of physical health support required, and the two link very closely together. So there's lots of things we can do to support our people, which in turn will support our businesses.
And what type of things have you seen businesses invest in?
Oof, there's a huge range. Let's say in respect to mental health, because that's a big theme that's been running through the report. So, we've seen a big uplift in organisations investing in mental health first aiders, investing in their EAP programs, their counselling services. They've been high up on the agenda. But these types of services focus on managing the existing problem, managing the risk. What we've really seen, which is really, really heartening, is many businesses now are recognising the need for prevention and building awareness about these health issues. So coaching support in the form of webinars for groups of employees or lifestyle consultations for individuals have been really, really popular. Now, the other area, I think, if I'm thinking about it through it, is where we've really seen traction gain this year is something we refer to as health leadership. So that's where we support organisations and their line managers in better meeting the challenges their teams are facing because of the leadership shown not just at an executive level, but all the way down to supervisor level.
Thank you, Richard. That gives us a really good feel for some of the impact the pandemic has had on people's wellbeing. Before we look at coping after COVID, does anyone have any questions on what we just discussed in regards to the coping with COVID section? Please feel free to unmute yourself if you do have any questions.
We'll do a Q&A at the end as well. So, but if you have got anything, just shout out now. And if anything pressing comes up as we're talking, just feel free just to jump in. There's not that many of us, so it shouldn't be too chaotic.
Okay. I'll continue with the second part then. So the second report, Coping After COVID, looks at the impact on businesses and the role wellbeing can play in boosting recovery. So does health of employees really mean wealth of businesses?
Yeah, it's a phrase that's starting to do the rounds now, isn't it? That our wealth is dependent on our health, and that ticks quite a lot of boxes. But I think it really does. Apart from these nice headline phrases we use, if we're going to recover from the pandemic, both socially and economically, each one of us on this call and each of the employees that we're looking after have to be at our most productive best, is probably the best way of phrasing it. And the latest research, which is the Coping After COVID, so what can businesses do, shows because of the significant impact wellbeing has on productivity, we need to see wellbeing not just as a nice have, but perhaps more as a strategic business tool to help us recover and move forward.
Happy staff, happy life, isn't it?
Part of it, yeah.
So what does the report tell us about the economic benefits of wellbeing strategies?
Well, we tend to think of wellbeing strategies as something that benefits the individuals, that improves their quality of life, and it does, and that's rightly so. That should be part of an employee wellbeing program. But equally, why are businesses going to invest if it doesn't help them as an organization? So what this report shows is that there's almost this dual benefit. Yes, we can improve the quality of people's lives, our employees' lives, but in doing that, we can also, wellbeing can also drive the performance of the business. Yeah. Now, the research showed, Coping After COVID report showed that by helping to maximize productivity, it's only part of the productivity equation, of course, then wellbeing could add potentially £61 billion to the English economy by 2025. So that's over the next 4 to 5 years. So when we're looking at how are we going to bounce back from this massive economic dent a lot of us have had, that starts to demonstrate the role wellbeing can play.
And how are businesses currently approaching wellbeing strategies to achieve this, and how might that need to change?
This is interesting, because when we did this research, what we saw that actually most businesses were already investing in wellbeing to some degree or other, which was really, really positive. But if you remember, part of it was we were talking with HR business partners, HR leaders, and what they were telling us is a significant number of them were telling us they were investing in wellbeing, but the strategies weren't living up to their potential in their eyes. Okay. In fact, we had 320,000 businesses with strategies that their HR professionals didn't feel were fully delivering to the level they were hoping it would do. So we then talked to them again in terms of sort of drilling down and finding what's going on there. And basically, HR professionals' view was it was often coming down to culture. Okay, and this might be familiar for a number of people on the call. So what we have to view is you can't put a wellbeing strategy in place in complete isolation. It only operates in the context of that business's culture. So if the leaders of that business don't really buy into wellbeing, yeah, then that feeling will trickle down, and it will then impact on the success of your program. So, senior leaders have to be wellbeing advocates for us to see the full potential of those programs coming through.
And when many businesses are struggling financially, can wellbeing really be a priority?
Yeah, this is that's a common question, isn't it? And when budgets are tight, yeah, wellbeing is often one of the first things to go. Now, given what we've just talked about, one could argue, and I use the word could carefully, that cutting wellbeing is actually a short-sighted decision at a time when economically we need to be at our most productive. Now, some evidence behind that for everyone on the call is the Coping After COVID report found that organisations without a wellbeing strategy, just 18% of those HR managers said productivity was very good. However, for those organisations that had a wellbeing strategy, 43% said their productivity was very good. So huge difference. And it's that kind of improvement, that kind of, how can I phrase it, optimization that could really make the difference between how quickly an organisation gets back on its feet after COVID. So that's why we're sort of firmly of the belief that wellbeing's got to be a business priority.
And what kind of benefits should businesses be expecting to see from investing in wellbeing?
Well, I think we've touched on that already, Sam. There are benefits at an individual employee level, this whole quality of life piece, people being happier and healthier. And then there's the business as a whole in terms of productivity. I think we all, hand on hearts, know that, if we've got healthier, happier people, they're going to be more engaged and more productive as employees. Simple as that. That's the simple answer. So increasing morale, improving performance, boosting productivity, they were the top 3 reasons HR managers told us that the reasons that they were investing in wellbeing. Yeah, and we're not the only ones to actually find this. The London School of Economics, for example, have done lots of pieces of research into this area. They found that wellbeing leads to higher productivity, higher customer satisfaction, and lower staff turnover. So, these things aren't nice to haves. If we're going to recover, then these are the types of things that we really, really need to be driving through in our business performance.
Absolutely agree. What wellbeing initiatives are most likely to help employees as they return back to the workplace?
Well, this is interesting because clients often ask me, what's the best thing to do? What's the one thing you'd pick? And the actual answer back is, well, look, there's no one size fits all solution. It's about listening to your people, understanding what their needs and wants are, and actually looking inwardly at you as a business. What are your business needs and wants? And hopefully they tie up with your employees' needs and wants. Don't always. Sometimes there's disconnect. So what I'd say is the first step everybody can do is always do some research on current well-being levels in your company. That helps you to understand what your people need. The next step is to understand what they want, and you do that by talking to your teams. Yeah, and let's be clear, what people want isn't always the same as what they need. Yeah, but it's what they want that might get them engaged and get them involved in your program, so you can then start to deliver what they need. So by doing that, you'll create a program that's tailored to your specific team's wants and needs. That will lead to much better engagement. Much better engagement will drive better results out of the wellbeing program that you've got in place.
Brilliant. So,
yeah.
Sorry, Richard, were you going to say?
No, I said, if that makes sense to everybody, if anybody's got a question as we're going along, just shout out. Please feel free to do so.
So you mentioned earlier about the importance of company culture, and I'd like to finish today by talking about that in a bit more detail. So as well as perhaps concluding with some top tips that everyone on the call could take away, and how they can develop their own personal resilience. So you mentioned that about a quarter of employees in the research stated that they are looking for extra wellbeing support for their employers in the coming months. Is that good news? Should be, shouldn't it?
Well, it is. You might say, shouldn't more be asking? But, actually, it was quite significant. All the research, and we've done earlier bits of research earlier in the pandemic last summer, all the themes coming through are people are looking to their employer for support. Okay, so it is good news. However, what we've also seen from other research and general experience is that if an organisation's culture and environment is not supportive of, conducive to good well-being, then, as I mentioned earlier, the initiatives you put in and target at employers will be less effective. Okay. Now, the good news is company culture is increasingly being recognised by CEOs, HR leaders as being critical to success. In fact, one service area we've really seen big leaps in this last year is health leadership training. Again, I mentioned that earlier in the talk. In fact, what we're now finding is that businesses are starting their wellbeing programs with health leadership in order to pave the way for interventions targeted at their employees. So it's get the managers, line managers set up first, getting them fully engaged in the program, fully believing in the program, so that you get maximum impact when you bring the programs in. Now, those businesses all recognize that culture is created and driven by leadership, and by leadership at all levels in the organization, by the way. But those really effective cultures, obviously, they always start at the top with people like us, people on the call here. It's down to us to start to drive the leadership of looking after people's health and getting people to look after their own health. It is a balance between the two.
And in terms of health leadership, can people on this call do something about this straight away?
Well, yeah, and the beauty of health leadership is it actually doesn't cost anything. So one of the, must say though, when we're looking at health leadership, what we're talking about is where managers, as part of the performance of their team, are taking into account how health and well-being can impact on that individual's performance, and then supporting the individual to have the right working practices, these types of things, so they can perform at their best. Yeah. Now, what that doesn't mean is that we're coaching individual managers to be well-being coaches. But the way I usually do it with line managers is say, look, your primary role as a manager is to deliver a performance from your team of X, whatever that is. It might be in HR, it might be in operations, it might be in sales. If your people aren't performing at their best because of health or well-being issues, that's impacting on performance. That therefore is a concern to you as a line manager because it's undermining the performance of your group. So you as a manager have got to do something about that. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that I want a line manager to start coaching an individual about how to sleep better. Yeah. How to rest and recover and pace themselves properly through the day, because I recognise they're not a wellbeing coach, but I certainly would want them encouraging all their team to attend any webinars that were being put on, any services that the business was providing, and then actually following up with those individuals to check that they did attend. How did they find it? Did they get anything of value out of that? What have they learned that might be they've identified could be a problem for them? How can I as a manager support you in overcoming that problem? Those types it's that type of management coaching that we're looking to encourage. Now, one of the simplest ways we can do that is each of us on this call can personally demonstrate health leadership through being a role model. So role modeling is key. And there are many ways we can act as a role model. So as managers, we always have to remember and be aware of what I refer to as the shadow we cast as a leader. You know, that shadow signals to our team what we believe is acceptable and unacceptable, and that influences their behavior. Yeah. So we can inadvertently put a lot of people off in terms of making adaptations to support their well-being because we don't behave in that same way. Yeah. So, for example, sending emails late at night when I should have switched off from work is potentially just encouraging other people to do likewise. So we can set examples to our teams by seen to be, you know, working reasonable hours, taking breaks, being fully engaged in all meetings, providing balanced reactions to problems, managing people perhaps based on outcomes that we want from them rather than inputs in terms of the amount of hours they're working. And also it's really, really important that we sort of role model what we're doing in terms of promoting our physical health as well as our mental health. So there's lots of things we can do which is about how we're personally behaving that give good examples to our people to follow suit. Now, we all know that mental health is a big issue out there. And one of our previous pieces of research called Divided Together found that half of people felt their mental well-being had deteriorated during the pandemic. Now, senior leaders, or leaders at any level for that matter, who talk about mental health can communicate a strong message. You know, we can communicate to the people underneath that it's actually okay not to be okay. It demonstrates that that's not a sign of weakness, that we can open up, we can risk being vulnerable. It's not a badge of honor just to keep pushing on and driving on and ignoring everything and burning out. Yeah, so there's an awful lot we can do culturally. Now, we also have to remember that as senior leaders, we on this call are also employees. So are we going to commit to the role of being a health leader if our own line managers aren't doing it as well? Yeah. So we've got to make sure, and this is the tricky bit, that this health leadership piece is adopted at all levels of the organisation. And that, therefore, it brings us back to the fact that people on this call, if you're not part of the senior leadership team, you've got to get your senior leaders engaged, because it's them that are going to drive the culture, and it's the culture that drives behaviours. Yeah.
I love that saying. From one of our meetings the other day, I made a note, and I've gone over it a few times with highlighter. Be aware of the shadow we cast as a leader, and that's so important. Just that that phrase, it's such an important
message behind the easiest way to think about it for everyone on this call, think about your life, think about your boss. How do they behave in all aspects of that, phrase. How does that subtly influence you in terms of what you do and don't do?
Absolutely.
And once you think that through and you go, wow, and then you realize exactly the same things happening below you from the shadow that you're casting. Yeah. So yeah, it's a tricky one. And I know that I once working with one organization where they had a very, very harsh senior management structure and culture and attitude. And we were doing a resilience program similar to this concept. And the manager of this team had brought his whole team and booked this whole session. And he said to me afterwards, Richard, that's brilliant, but I've done what my job is. I've got to be a deflector shield. I've got to create a culture bubble where all my team know from me what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. And I'm the shield to protect them from the seniors. Now that's an extreme example, but it's that sort of responsibility we can all take. You know, don't let what the organization's culture is influence you. Try to create your own culture and your own bubbles to allow your teams to perform as best they can. Yeah.
Brilliant. So from a wellbeing perspective, if you had to select one thing for everyone on this call to focus on to help their business to recover and to recover quickly from the pandemic, what would it be?
Well, that's an easy one, Sam. To everyone on this call, I would say focus on yourself first, right? Which might sound really odd. So just let me explain. How can our businesses best recover? I'd guess that there'll probably be general agreement on this call that'll be dependent on the collective performance of our employees. Yeah. But that performance can only be driven by leadership. So the second point to consider is the speed at which we recover. Well, that in part is going to be determined by the resilience of our business. However, resilient businesses need resilient leaders. That's what a resilient business is about, resilient leadership. So our employees' number one support resource is, and always will be, their senior leadership team. Okay, so that means everyone on this call, we've got to look after ourselves to be in the best possible shape so that we can provide the best possible support and leadership to our people. Simple as that.
And can you give us an example of what we could do?
Okay, let's think. One of the biggest challenges for all of us as leaders is probably, and shout me out if I'm wrong here, tiredness and fatigue. Yeah. And for some of us, possibly close to burnout, although we probably wouldn't be on this call if we got to that stage, to be honest with you. So everyone on this call has probably experienced how tiredness and fatigue impacts on our personal performance and our mental resilience, and subsequently our ability to lead. Yeah. And that makes perfect sense because all the research shows us that those with higher physical energy levels, we refer to it as physical resilience, by the way, tend to cope better with pressure. So what gives us these energy levels? Well, there are four key things, and you can almost sort of compare this to a car, shall we say. So first of all, what fuel do you put inside this machine of yours? So think of your body and your mind as a biological machine, which is in fact what it is. It's this amazing biological machine. So what fuel do you put in it to fuel it? You know, are you eating healthy, balanced meals? Are you drinking enough water, for example, to keep that machine properly hydrated and functioning at its optimum? Right? Next thing, what levels of exercise are you adopting on a daily, weekly basis? Because exercise is almost like how we service this biological machine. So the fitter this biological machine of yours is, the more efficient it is at using the energy resources that you, or the fuel that you give it. Third area, sleep. So how good is your sleep? How how fresh are you when you wake up? What's the quality of your sleep like? And that's, if in effect, the topping up of the battery. And we all know when we're tired and fatigued and had a really bad night's sleep, how poor we are at communicating with people, losing our patience, you know, relationships go down. There's a few smiles there already. Yeah. And that all affects our ability to be resilient, our ability to lead. And the fourth area, so we've had fuel, exercise, sleep. How do you then pace yourself through the day? So that's about how you pace the use of those energy levels. You know, if you're operating 100%, so pedal to the metal, they call it in car terms, yeah, accelerator full down, then that energy levels are going to burn out really quickly. We cannot operate 100% all of the time. Human beings are actually designed to operate on what's called an oscillating rhythm. So I don't know whether you can see it from, or you remember it from physics at school. It's where it goes up and down like this, a wave, an oscillating rhythm. So we're designed to operate in peaks of maximum effort followed by rest and recovery. So a good example of that is the optimum concentration span of the human brain is 50 minutes, and then it starts to ebb. So if you're working maximally on a project for 50 minutes, 2 or 3 minutes break just to refresh, refocus the brain, helps you go again. Okay, that type of principle. Okay, so they're the sort of areas we should be looking at. And yes, they're all physical things, but those, if those physical things aren't in place, that physical resilience isn't there, it undermines your mental resilience and your capability to make decisions, to communicate, to lead. So to finish off, Sam, in the context of this, and it comes back to the one thing you should do, which is about looking after yourself as well. The whole thing links together. Let me ask everyone on the call a rhetorical question, by the way. What could you do tomorrow that you're not doing today to enhance your physical activity levels, your physical energy levels, sorry. Okay, which in turn would help you to be in a better position to support your people and to meet the challenges of your day. So here's a simple activity that you can do each day to answer that question. So each day, ask yourself 3 questions. Now, thinking about your diet, exercise, sleep, how you pace yourself. Okay, so 3 questions. First one is, what one thing will you consciously do tomorrow before the working day starts that will help prepare you to meet the challenges of the day coming up? Yeah. Second thing, what one thing will you consciously plan to do tomorrow? Note the word consciously plan, during the day to help you maintain your performance in meeting those challenges. Just might be a simple thing. And then this evening, by the way, this evening, what one thing are you consciously going to plan to do this evening to help you to recover as best you can from today so that you're in the best possible position to meet the challenges you're going to face tomorrow? 3 simple things you can do each day, which if you did do, this time next week, you're doing 3 things every day that you haven't been doing so far that will help improve your physical resilience and improve your capability to support others. Simple.
Can I give you all an example? Because I've actually started doing this myself. So one thing that I start doing consciously before the working day starts is going out for a walk in the morning. Normally when my kids have got up and they're ready for school, obviously the weather in Worcestershire and the surrounding areas has been absolutely horrific for the last few days. So I will do fasted cardio in the morning, just jogging on the spot. Work, rest, work, rest, work, rest. And that puts my energy levels really up quite high, ready for me to start work. Whereas before, I was finding that I was actually quite sluggish when I was logging on and didn't want my breakfast and things like that. So it's definitely helped boost the energy for the day. And then another thing, Richard, when we go back to our senior leaders and how they pave the way for us, my boss is always telling me off because I tend to get into a work mode and I don't come away from that work mode. And I was missing out on my lunch breaks, or I was having my lunch breaks at my desk because I was struggling to take away my work life and my home life. I was struggling to split the two apart. And my boss kept on telling me off. So I've now booked in, yeah, good for him. I've now booked a slot in my diary every day for some me time, whether that be having lunch away from my office where I leave my phone, or whether that's me going out and doing some exercise. But I've booked that into my working day to kind of help me with that. And the third one is no screen time before bed. We are terrible with our mobile phones. So I stop screen time for half an hour or an hour, depending on how good I'm being, before bed. And that really helps me go back off to sleep properly.
Fantastic. It'd be interesting to see whether anybody else has got any top tips that they use. I've got two while people think about it, and then they can perhaps jump on. One, with us working virtually and everything's doing on Zoom like this, my days are just back to back. So what I do now is the meetings that I organise or that I attend, mainly the ones that I organise, you automatically are booked for 30 minutes or 60 minutes. But you can edit the time. So if it's what would have been an hour, I always book it for 50 minutes. And if it was 30 minutes, I'll always book it for 25 minutes. And that just gives me a 5 or a 10-minute break between meetings where I can get up, stretch, clear my mind, get myself ready for the next one, perhaps go and get a drink, have a comfort break, that type of thing. And that really does help break things up. So you're not literally just rushing from one thing to another. And the other thing is I've got into this real discipline, and it really works well in terms of breaking the boundaries because I'm working from home all the time. So at the end of the day, when I've finished, I'll close everything up, I'll clean everything away so I can't see it. I'll go upstairs and I'll get changed or have a shower. And actually it's just that physical change of changing your clothes or having a shower. Psychologically, it gives you that, right, I've finished break point. And that really works for me. Anybody got any top tips, ideas they use?
Please feel free, everyone, to unmute yourself. If you want to put your cameras on, do so.
Okay, I'll go. That boundary thing, that really resonates with me actually, because we've been working from home for such a long time, and I found that I'd started to drift away from my desk in the spare room, and I was starting my mornings whilst having my coffee, logging onto my laptop. And it's only a really little thing, but I've started taking my breakfast, my cup of tea, into my conservatory bit, just like a little space where I don't normally go, and having just that start to the morning without doing anything. And I find it really hard because I'm always thinking, oh, I should be doing this, I should be doing that, and I should be loading the dishwasher. But it's like you say, if we're not doing it ourselves, we can't be telling other people they should be doing it either. So
that's a great tip. Yeah, and by doing things like that, it also gives you the opportunity, if you're talking to one of your team, is actually just being able to say, you know what, I do this, it really worked well, it's really worked well for me, you ought to try it. That's health leadership. It's just prompting and putting things in people's mind. But we did a lot of, before the pandemic, we did a lot of work in relation to home working, because an awful lot of organizations over the past 5 years have been slowly making this move, but not obviously anywhere near what we've done the last 12 months. And people find it really, really difficult, because when they go to work, you've got your breakfast, you've got your commute, and then there is almost a set structure to the day, isn't it? Where you take lunch, you have a break, you yakka to people, get some light relief there. But when you're on your own, all those structures disappear, and we tend to work a lot harder, a lot longer. So it's really important doing things like that, Yvonne, where you're purposely putting structure into your day and routine, which forces you to, almost, you're forcing yourself to act in a certain way, aren't you? Yeah.
It's remembering that if you did have that commute, it's not to then have that commute as an extra hour working, isn't it? You've still got that commute mentally, just doing something else with that time, isn't it?
Yeah. Anyone else? That was brilliant.
Yeah. Has anyone else got any questions at all, or anything that they would like to add, or any hints and tips that they do?
We can't have done that good a job.
Sorry, it's me again. I did put in the chat, but when you said 3 things, I don't know if I was clear. So it was 1 physical thing to prepare yourself for the day. And then the last one was something in the evening to recover. I wasn't clear about the second one.
No, the 3 things, it doesn't have to be physical. It could be physical or mental. The first one is, what are you consciously going to plan to do before the working day to get yourself prepared for the challenges that are coming up? And yours was a perfect example. I'm going to take my breakfast there. I'm going to forget work, just get my head in the right place, then start, right? The second thing then is, what are you consciously going to plan to do during the day to help maintain your performance? So, for example, that might be what Sam was doing in terms of taking a break, going for a walk, you know, as an example. And then the third thing is, what one thing are you going to consciously plan to do in the evening to recover as best you can to prepare for the next day? So an example of that would be, for example, the one I gave in terms of having a shower or changing my clothes, so psychologically I've finished, or the one Sam gave by reducing no screen time, whether it's phones, laptop, TV, an hour before you switch off the lights, you know, to aid better quality of sleep, that type of thing.
You'll be surprised, that screen one, it really does get you. You will be surprised.
Yeah, well, the screen, if anybody's wondering why on the screen piece, there's 2 reasons. One, when we're looking at our screens, we're probably looking at something that might be actually creating anxiety, or alternatively, huge excitement, mirth, and humor. And they actually then wake us up or agitate us, so it makes us more difficult to go to sleep. The other one is a sort of physical, biological thing that most devices, unless they've got appropriate screens, will emit something called blue light, and that restricts the production of a hormone called melatonin, which your body starts to create when the day starts to go into night, starts getting dark, which is a sleep-inducing hormone. So you've got that double effect of the hormone that you want to be produced isn't being produced, that makes you sleepy, and your activity is agitating or exciting you, so you're not winding down properly.
Okay, so if anyone has got any questions, but you don't want to ask now, or you have any questions after this webinar closes, do feel free to email me. My email address is in the chat box. It's sholdaway@westfieldhealth.com, or you can contact your account manager within the chamber, and then they can contact me as well. But I know Yaz is sending everybody my contact details as well after this. So thank you all for